Broadcasting from Hollywood, it's the official On Air with Brandon J podcast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brandon. Welcome to On Air with Brandon J. I'm joined by a special guest, casting director, performance coach, Paul Jensen. Joey, how are you?
I'm awesome. How are you? Thank you for having
I'm
me.
doing well, considering all things that are taking place in Hollywood right now. We'll get into that in just a minute, but it's great to have you on the show. For all of you that do not know who Joey is, she's an amazing casting director, performance coach. So Joey, it's an honor to have you on the show. And, you're coming on at just the right time, because one of the key topics I wanted to ask you about, since you have more of an in-depth understanding, are what is going on with the writer's strike and the ramifications that go along with this.
Well, right now, all the talks are at a standstill. So, and I really don't think the writers are all that motivated to come to a resolution at the moment, because they know that very soon the actors will go out, and more than likely the directors will go out. And even if the directors don't go out, they're pretty sure the actors will, which will give them, in their point of view, leverage to be able to get a better deal. I think the studios perhaps see it the same way, where they feel like, well, hey, if all of them go on strike, then eventually all of them will be hurting, and we'll be able to strong arm them more so into a resolution. And, when you look at both sides from, let's say, a 30,000 foot view, well, certainly the networks want to be able to produce new content. However, the word on the street is, if this goes on for too long, then all the reality shows will mushroom more. The competition shows, the game shows, which don't require those union writers, and those audiences are growing. So
they're more cost effective. They don't take as much as a feature film or a television series that may be a mil per episode or something of that nature.
Exactly. And so in some respects, from just a business standpoint, they have a fantastic Band-Aid. But there's a huge piece of the audience that wants the storytelling and the original artistry, that the reason that this form of media really took off. Motion pictures and television took off because of the magic of storytelling. So I just don't think they'll be motivated to really resolve this until everyone's on strike, and then there's a long standoff, and then they'll come to the table.
Well, I thank you for that explanation, because, we hear through the media, oh, these people are on strike, but getting the perspective and the point of view from somebody like yourself who deals with this on a regular basis, it's just awesome to hear and kind of understand what's going on. And I know that the WGA is not the only thing that's in terms of strikes, being the writer's strike. I know that there's Directors Guild is dealing with things, and even rumor has it that SAG will potentially be going on strike as well. And I have to say, I kind of stand with the actors and actresses, right, that are affected, because they pour their soul into this, just as the writers do and the directors do, into making great content and telling great stories. So, it will be very interesting to see in these next couple of months during the summertime.
For sure. And there's a lot of backstory that is supporting where they're at in this negotiation, because for any of the writers or actors who've been in the industry for many years, several decades, they're old enough to know what happened in the most crucial element of the writer strike that happened back in the 1980s,
Right.
when there was this big disruption and video came in, and cable came in, and then it was all about, what are the residuals going to be? And the writers wanted, what they anticipated to be a piece of the profits. And at the time, the studios were like, well, hey, who knows if this video or cable business is going to take off. So we don't want to offer up more than what we can anticipate we might receive. And as a result of all of that, a lot of the writers felt like we didn't get the best deal. They made, mega billions on cable and on
Right.
video. And so we don't want to let that happen again. But
Right.
at the same time, the studios still have that same point of view now, where they feel like, well, downloads are decreasing. A lot of these subscription services, people are vacating. So we don't want to offer up too much because we just don't know the landscape, going down the road. So it's a similar time. And, history repeats itself. So the writers are trying to learn from the past.
It does, and not just fashion, but in content, in music. I mean, you hear a lot of the same sounds of music that come back around as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So that's something that I can relate to. So Joey, when someone looks at potentially bringing you on board to become that casting director, whether it be, let's just say, a television series or a feature film, what are some of the qualifications that must be addressed before you will even consider, signing on to a project?
Well, in general, I would say that the best formula is that the project is funded, because that gives the casting director the proper arsenal, if you will, to do their job. So even though you'd like to think the way an actor's mind runs is like, wow, is this a great story? Is this an awesome character for me to play? It's not really like that. It's a component, but when you're talking about movie stars, their careers are run by their agents and managers. And that's why they're there, because actors tend to be so passionate and creative. Their tendency to give themselves away sooner or too quick is their downfall. So their agents and managers are there to really protect them from making mistakes and making sure they're going to get paid properly. So they don't like to offer them up unless they know 100% of the backing is there. So for a casting director, they want to know, is the project funded? They want to know, is a director attached? So when you have those elements, you have the money, you have a director attached who's got a reputation. Now you feel like you have ammunition to really go up against these big agencies to try to say, yeah, I got what it takes, and this is a great project. And so you can really offer somebody a, a real paycheck, as
Right.
opposed to saying, I have this great project, I think it's awesome for so and so, because it's just not enough to get the deal done.
Right. I mean, I think the proof of funds thing, and I've seen this with independent filmmaking, right? Where you're producing a film and let's say the potential investor wants to see certain names attached, but it's a catch-22.
Yeah.
Because you can't get certain names attached until you prove to their representation, as you just stated, that this film is fully fundable. And this thing is fully funded, and we have the capacity, per se, to cast this A-lister in the film. And I understand the frustration from being a manager or an agent or even an attorney or an accountant, because there's a ton of fluff out there. There's a lot of hearsay, and a lot of people can't back it up. So I think in your position, I think it's always more of a security, per se, when you're dealing with the major studios like a Paramount and a Sony and a Warner and things of that nature.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, and also if I got involved with something that really wasn't credible, and if I did that repeatedly, it's going to damage my own reputation. And
Right.
it's taken so many years to get to a place where you feel the industry's going to respond to your inquiries, you definitely want to be careful that you don't take away that weight that took so long to get.
But isn't it funny how Hollywood is, right? And it's not about what we did yesterday or last year, all these great accolades and things that we've accomplished, but what are we doing today and what are we doing tomorrow? And this leads me into my next question for you, Joey. I know you're working on some current features right now. Can you disclose what these features are, who's involved, how did you get involved, all of the above?
So it's really interesting because despite the fact there's this strike going on, oddly, it does not affect my process. If anything, it makes my process better, because my process is that I am offering up projects to A-listers to get involved, which will then greenlight the rest of the casting process. Now, typically, what's really difficult about that is even though there's a big percentage of A-listers, there's like a main core group that, are always, always, always getting offers. Well, if the studios are, not heavily out there producing product because of the strike, then the amount of volume that the agents or managers are servicing right now has slowed tremendously. So that means for someone like me who's out there trying to garner talent, I don't have to worry as much about the bevy of projects that they're looking at. I can get my project read a lot sooner when I'm making an offer to somebody. So it's awesome. A really good time for what I'm doing.
So you're like, bring on the strikes. I'm ready. I'm not saying that. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, right. But my current project called On Fire. We're aiming to start filming in September. I can't really say who's attached at this juncture, but it is being directed by Sean McNamara, who I've worked with for many years and did the movie Soul Surfer, if you remember the story about Bethany Hamilton, who got her.
Yes, and Sean was a special guest on season 1 of the podcast, and we spoke about Reagan and the Hershey's, the Milton Hershey story. So it's awesome to see the dots connecting.
So in the tone of Soul Surfer, On Fire is the remarkable story of John O'Leary, who today is a successful author, an incredible inspirational speaker. However, when he was 9 years old, growing up in St. Louis, Missouri, he was riding his bike down the street and there were a bunch of boys playing with a little bit of matches and fire, and he wanted to play with them. And they said, "No, you're too little, get away."
Right.
So he goes home and he thinks, I don't need them. I'm going to do my own thing. So he takes this, gasoline can that has 5 gallons of gasoline in it, pours a little out in his garage, lights it, and then it gets sucked back in the can and explodes.
Oh, wow.
And he is then burned on 100% of his body and 85% third-degree burns.
That's intense.
This was in 1987. It's huge news out there. And then at that time, Jack Buck was like one of the biggest announcers in baseball and certainly super famous in St. Louis. So he heard about it. They gave John O'Leary a 0.5% chance to survive in 24 hours. And when Jack Buck heard about this, he went to the hospital, and this boy's eyes were swollen shut. He could hardly move. He'd lost 3 fingers on each hand in the fire. And he heard this booming radio announcer voice saying, "Kid, you're going to get through this,"
Right. A word of encouragement. Absolutely.
And sure enough, he made it through the night. And then Jack Buck kept coming back. And one day Jack came and he brought him a baseball from the famous player, Ozzie Smith, that was autographed.
Oh, incredible.
He was so stoked. And he said, "John, all you need to do is sign your name, write a thank you note, and send it back." And John, who was still recovering, said, "I'm barely learning how to walk. I can't even write yet. I've got 2 fingers on each hand. How am I going to say thank you?" And he's like, "Kid, you'll figure it out." So sure enough, he wrote a thank you note, sent it off. And what happened is that Jack Buck came back to visit him and kept bringing him more baseballs. So over like 8 months and 60 baseballs later, he recovered, he regained his life back. And as time went on, he became a very successful entrepreneur, author, inspirational speaker. And to think that this was a kid who had less than 1% chance to survive, it's it just shows how much our mind is so powerful to overcome obstacles.
Well, absolutely. The overcoming of the adversity there, of the temporary handicap, as I would like to call it, based upon this story, it's incredible. I mean, it gives anybody inspiration and hope, whatever they might be going through, to hear a
Absolutely.
story like this.
A lot of people will associate my career with faith-oriented stories.
Uh-huh.
And people said to me, well, what's the most fun thing you like to do? I really love show business because of the stories we can tell, because the power of those stories can truly change people's lives. And whether it's through humor or dramatic stories that have some sort of unbelievable epiphany, I just think the power of that is incredible. So if I can be a part of stories and real stories that really celebrate the successes of what people have overcome, that's what motivates me to be a part of great movie product out there.
That's awesome. Joey, what advice do you have for those out there that are let's just use actors and actresses that their desire is the right word to get casted into the right project? What advice would you give them to potentially get in front of the right people, such as yourself and others?
So it's such a different climate today than it used to be.
Yes.
And that is way to the performer's advantage. So before the pandemic, you had to pretty much live in Hollywood and have representation that was well connected. And you still need representation that's well connected, but you don't necessarily have to live here because auditions are not happening in person. People are submitting themselves on tape, and that allows them to save a lot more money and not have to live in expensive
There
California.
you go.
Right
Hollywood,
on.
California, to be exact.
But the thing is, when I came to LA, we had three networks: ABC, NBC, CBS. So imagine if we only had those three networks today, how much product would be eliminated. So
Wow.
now, you've got 500 stations, all different ways that you can be seen. And it used to be that everything about your career relied on always being chosen. Somebody picked you, somebody liked you, somebody chose you. And your control was really minimal, except to perfect your skills. And of
Right.
course, today you must perfect your skills, but you have so much more power over your career. So the real answer to your question is beef up that social media, beef up your own visibility, take control of what can happen to you, show your leadership skills, learn more about production, writing, and do it for yourself, and you will bring it to you. So, just like one of my favorite movies that Kevin Costner did, if they build it, they will come, right?
Right.
If you build it, they will come. And that's really the story. That's how it works.
Speaking of Kevin Costner, I know you're doing some stuff with Paramount, and when you said Kevin Costner, I thought about Paramount. I thought about Yellowstone. What a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
series, just
Incredible.
phenomenal series. And I aspire to be a little like John Dutton one day myself. So
Good for you.
this film that you're working on, Artists Award, can you give us a little insight? What's it like working with Emil Hirsch and others regarding this film?
Oh, wow. So this is a cool story because I started working on the film in 2019 before the pandemic. So it's weird. Like nothing stops casting. Not a writer's strike and not a pandemic, right? I worked through the pandemic trying to attach the stars to the film. And it was through that whole time to be able to get Emil Hirsch attached to this movie.
Right.
And it's a World War II film. It is a Holocaust film. And if you remember Schindler's List, there was a scene where Spielberg shot this young Jewish couple in the camp getting married. And it was just to show that nothing stopped them in the camp. Romance was alive despite the torture.
Amazing.
And this story
amazing.
focuses, right? And this story focuses on that couple for real. Joseph Bao, he was an artist and a forgerer who actually was the artist behind Schindler's List. He created the fake identities of the Jews who were allowed to leave the camp and work in Schindler's factory. And then little by little, they were able to siphon those people off. They were able to leave Poland and Germany because their IDs showed them as different people. And that's how they eventually were able to escape. And although the full accolade is to Schindler, who of course wanted to help, but he too had a business motivation to make as much money as he could with his factory. And if it wasn't for Joseph Bao creating those forgeries, all these people's lives would not be saved. So it really tells that true story. And then how eventually he and his wife met up after the war, because they were separated after they got married, and they met up in Israel after the war. And then like 40 years later, this lawyer came to him and said, would you testify against the Nazi officers in a trial in Vienna? And so he had to think to himself, do I really want to relive my life from 40 years ago when
that's a tough decision to make.
All these guys are 40 years older. It's a lot. And so that's what the movie's about. His contemplation of how much do I want to relive my past and bring truth to justice.
Wow. I can't even imagine having to make a decision like that. It's almost like having to go back in time and forgive those that have done you wrong. And it's like, oh, do I really want to revisit this trauma? But I think there's a healing, a natural healing that comes from that. So I'm excited to see both of these features. And the one you just mentioned is being distributed by Paramount, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Amazing. Joey, I need to get on your payroll because you know what? You're like an essential worker, right? It doesn't matter if there's a strike or anything. You are good to go no matter what. And that's a great position to be in.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I feel very blessed and want to, no matter what, try to keep all momentum going because, I think most people realize in all of hardship, entertainment has always flourished.
Yes, it has. Even in the Great Depression. I mean, Gone with the Wind. I mean, look at what Gone with the Wind did years ago, way before you and I were even thought of.
So, along with my mantra of being a piece of great storytelling in this industry, I feel really strongly about trying to keep that momentum going no matter what the headwinds are. So, it's a great thing.
There you go. Joey, where can we follow you on social media?
JoeyPaulJensen.com. You can follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter. And I'm all about it.
Casting director, performance coach, Joey Paul Jensen. Joey, thank you for being a special guest today. I really enjoyed picking your brain about a few things that are currently happening, current events that are taking place in Hollywood. So thank you for your perspective. Congrats on all of the new success that is on the way, and definitely keep us updated on what you have coming up next.
I sure will. Thank you so much. Continued success.
Yes, Joey Paul Jensen right here. I'm Brandon. We'll see you next time Goodbye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to On Air with Brandon J. Follow on Instagram at I am Brandon J.